Okay, I want to welcome everyone back. Next up, we have the presentation is Senakw, the Future of Vancouver, presented by Khelsilem, a community leader from the Squamish Nation in Vancouver, Canada, where he holds the title of spokesperson and councillor. Councillor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you as well. It's a deep honor to be here with each and every one of you. I'll begin just by briefly introducing myself in my language, a common way that we use in my people to introduce yourselves and to express thanks, and just say Tanoya Pansiai, Atlansquawan a Plinsquatch no miap a Tutsquile Titsis, Nashta Ans Khelsilem, a Ans Squamish, Vancouver. Just wanted to say welcome and thank you. Grateful to be here. My heart's glad to be here to see all of you and to present on some of the exciting work that my nation is involved in here in Vancouver, which Vancouver has a reputation for a lot of things. A reputation around urbanism, a reputation around development, but also I think a growing reputation about its relationship with the local indigenous communities who are the host nations to this territory. And also to the challenges it has faced, both in terms of rising home prices, rising rents, the challenges it's faced around money laundering through the real estate industry in past years, but also the future of Vancouver as a city grappling with the questions of affordability, urban design, density, community planning, and things like that. So I'm hoping to share details, assuming nobody knows that you might not know much about the Senakw Development, and then really want to open it up for questions. And I'll try to provide a little bit of my own analysis around why I think what my nation is doing and some of the other nations are doing in this area to be so important and also valuable to the growth of our city here. I'm going to take you to senakw.com, which is our website for the Senakw project. And Senakw is the name of our village at the foot of what's known as Broad Street Bridge, around the present day location of Vanier Park within Vancouver. And it was a village that my people had lived in for many generations, going back before contact. Contact being first contact with Spanish and British explorers was in the late 1770s, around 1781. But there wasn't really a rapid colonization of the lands in terms of physical development or population really until the mid 1800s with the development of a logging industry, the fur trade, gold rush, and other developments. And then finally, in 1911, when the Canadian Pacific Railway opened, bringing a significant influx of mostly European immigrants, but also a significant history and connection to mainland China, to India, with significant waves of immigration from the Pacific Ocean region as well. So the Senakw Development, just to put it in context, that you can kind of see here, you see the downtown sort of core of Vancouver on the left. You can see some like other little downtown cores for some of the neighboring municipalities, but the largest downtown in Vancouver is right here on the left, on this peninsula of Vancouver. There's a bridge that crosses over this little inlet called False Creek. And then you can see on the right, in comparison, really some development and some buildings, but really what a lot of people don't realize about Vancouver is nearly 80% of it is zoned for single detached homes. And Vancouver has practiced a type of urbanism that in some ways has been applauded, but also hasn't fully, I think, come to fruition in terms of the dreams and hopes. And what I mean by that is Vancouver as a region has really engaged in this grand bargain. And this has been sort of put forward by some of the past chief urban planners in Vancouver, which is we allow for these massive skyscrapers or tall towers in order to protect single detached homes from ever being touched or redeveloped or densified. And so it looks like Vancouver is engaging in a significant amount of urban development, but it actually, in raw numbers, it's not a lot. And that's because we condense all of the density into one type of urban form in order to spare and protect massive tracts of land throughout the city. And a lot of this contributes directly to the unaffordability issues that we face in Vancouver, both in terms of housing prices, but also in terms of rents. So the Senakw project is something that the Squamish Nation has been developing and working on for over 10 years, but more recently in the last 5 years, went to market as a nation, as a First Nation. There, people might be more familiar with a Native American, but indigenous government. We have an elected council, we have voters, we have citizens, we can enact our own laws, so to speak, in some ways, with who owns lands that are considered federal lands, and so outside of the jurisdiction of provincial or municipal legal authorities in some regards. Not fully, but in some major ways that I'll speak about in a second. One of the biggest ones is that when it comes to zoning rules for federal lands, like Indian reservation lands in Canada, the council is largely the government authority that can dictate the type of density that is put onto a particular lands that we own collectively on behalf of our people. And so the little about 10.5 acre piece of land that's located right next to the downtown Vancouver area is land that my nation reacquired through a court case and legal battles, which is a long story in itself. And I can share an article for more detailed history around the history of colonization and the development of my nation in that regard, which highlights some of the legal history around that. But essentially, we reacquired this land. It got transferred into federal reserve land status. And then we began to explore it as an economic development zone within our nation's land holdings. And we have a number of land holdings which are more community focused, where we have community centers, health centers, elder centers, traditional gathering spaces, cultural spaces, and also affordable sort of social housing for our citizens, which is actually located about 20-minute drive from the Senakw lands, more on the north shore of Vancouver, which is like a suburb of Vancouver. And we have a number of communities there and a number of communities in Squamish, which is about another 57 kilometers north of Vancouver. It used to be a rural town. However, it's gone through significant development as the housing crisis has taken place in BC. It's now, it's been growing by 25% in property values over the last 6 years or so. So huge development happening throughout the entire territory. So the thing about Senakw is it's largely viewed through an economic development lens, which is it's intended to achieve highest and best use of the land, to create long-term economic value for the nation, to be able to support our economic and social goals for our community. We want to be able to pay for significant social services for our community members, like elder care, youth care, affordable housing for our people, environmental stewardship, language and cultural regeneration, a whole host of social services that we want and need to provide for our community. And frankly, we're not interested in waiting for senior levels of government to give us the funding adequate funding to meet the needs of our community. We see ourselves as being a more active as opposed to passive role in searching out business opportunities through our land holdings to generate long-term economic value. So the Senakw development, which I want to show a little bit of some images, it's on 10.5 acres. It's 4 million square feet of development, 6,000 rental homes, about 950 affordable homes at reduced rents. It'll be the largest net zero carbon residential project in Canada. So net zero energy efficiency within the development once built, using the highest, one of the highest forms of energy efficiency that we can build to in our STEP code. It'll be the largest indigenous economic development project in Canadian history. It's about just under a $2.98 billion construction cost across all 4 phases. And it incorporates historical, architectural, cultural, artistic construction as well as huge entrepreneur opportunities for our members to be able to be a part of the contracting and subcontracting trades and opportunities throughout the project. The project is roughly 11 to 12 towers. We're still nailing down the exact amount, but basically 11 to 12 towers, mostly rental residential. There might be some daycares and amenities, some commercial, some office space, but largely residential. And it's one of the densest forms of development in the region. By comparison, there is another major project that's happening in Vancouver called Oak Ridge, which is proposing about 10 million, or is equivalent to Senakw, but 4 times larger in terms of the floor space of the size of the development. And here's a bit of a fly through the development, so you can see some of the artistic renderings that the architect, Reverie Architecture, has worked with our people and our advisors and our cultural knowledge holders on how to incorporate and represent our Squamish culture throughout the development. The exciting thing is, yeah, that it's 6,000 rental apartments located in the downtown, pretty close to the downtown urban core, in a city with a desperate need for rental. And within the context of the city of Vancouver as a municipal government has set a goal to build 20,000 rental homes over the next 10 years. And we're proposing to build 6,000 of that 20 over about a 4.5 to 5 year period. And the concept is it's land that's owned by the nation. We went out to market, did an RFP with a number of developers who are interested in partnering with us on terms that were favorable to the nation. We selected a preferred developer and negotiated a master development agreement, and have created a 50-50 partnership with them where we put in the land, we put in no equity, we have no obligation to acquire or to secure any of the financing. It's 100% on our development partner. And we collect 100% of all tax revenues off the land, including property taxes, service fees, community amenity contributions, etc. Some of that tax revenue that we charge off the development will then go to pay for service fees that we negotiate with the city or with the regional district around services like sewage and water and all that kind of stuff. But largely, it will generate long-term passive revenue for the nation as a rental stream for the nation. That being said, I think sometimes erroneously people deem, especially in Vancouver, rental housing as sort of quote unquote, there's this misnomer of luxury rental. But the reality is that all new and most new purpose-built rental that is being produced in the Vancouver region is still set at rents that are expensive to median income holders or below, but in reality are still part of a housing need for the middle class within Vancouver. So those making, the middle class defined as those 25% below the median to double the median income, the individual and household. And there's a huge need for that housing. And what happens is if we don't provide a spectrum of housing types for the housing need, then you start to see this upward and downward pressure on the more affordable forms of housing. But also you fundamentally just have a supply and demand issue where landlords are able to charge rents that are based off of what the market will bear, but tenants don't have a lot of negotiation leverage when they are trying to negotiate their rents with their landlords. So we've seen over the last few years, especially because of the pandemic, there has actually been a population growth in Vancouver because BC and Vancouver in particular have handled the pandemic quite well in Canada compared to some of the other jurisdictions. We didn't have to shut down as drastically as some other places in Canada. So we've actually seen job growth in BC and in Vancouver more than anywhere else in Canada during the pandemic. But that being said, we've seen a decrease in immigration and a decrease migration across Canada in some ways, but also we anticipate that there's going to be a massive increase in growth once most of the restrictions in international travel can resume. And Vancouver will start to experience, again, a rapid rise in rents and housing prices. But it's due to the lack of supply. The tenants are fundamentally operating from a weak position where they can't negotiate lower rents or less increases in rents over time. We do have a form of rent control in BC, in our region, which caps the rent increases at inflation per year only, so around 2.4%. One of the best rent caps in the country. It's actually been lowered over the last few years, but we still have a challenge in the city through a municipal lens, being able to produce a significant amount of purpose-built rental housing to meet the market need and meet the housing needs. And if it's a nonprofit affordable housing problem, you would call it a wait list. And when it's in the market, it's a housing need. And we can see that through the growth in jobs and job centers that are happening throughout the region, but often happening in contexts where it forces people to engage in urban sprawl and move further and further away from the urban cities because that's the only place that they can afford. And then there's poor urban planning from that sense. So anyways, that's me just going off about the urban issues that we're facing, but more on Senakw. The other aspect that I'm really excited about too is, and I'm going to see if I can find an image, is we're proposing to connect it to some light rail streetcar, activating a historic streetcar network in Vancouver. And we're also, in terms of its development, and I just want to draw back to some of the design choices that we've made as a development. I mentioned that it'll be one of the biggest carbon neutral developments in Canada. One of the really fascinating, important pieces that we're really proud of is that for 6,000 rental units, we're proposing, and we've designed it for approximately a 1:10 ratio on car stalls. So, but we've incorporated about 6,000 bike stalls within the development under the ground level and the first and second and possibly third floor parking. So it will be one of the lowest car-focused developments in North America. Just to put that math into context, 6,000 rental units, apartments, but around approximately 600 parking stalls. The rest will be vehicle parking stalls. The rest will be bike-centered infrastructure. And in terms of timeline, I'm going to jump to questions soon. In terms of timeline, we are hoping to move into construction in the next 6 months or so on the first phase for infrastructure on the site. We'll then move through construction of the first phase, which will be a few towers, and then over the next about 4.5-5 years, we'll move into all the other phases and complete construction on all the developments. And just to put that in context, the typical development process in this lens takes about double the time. And the contributing factor to all of this is that it's on indigenous land, where my council is the governing body that's controlling the density, controlling the design choices, and also controlling the value creation that we're trying to generate for our community. I would say lastly, our last message is that this is the beginning of a new era. We see this as the beginning of a new era for the Squamish Nation. There are other First Nations as well in the area. There's 3 who call Vancouver home, and it's their home territory, who are all engaging in real estate development, both jointly and separately. But this is really considered the beginning of an era for our nation, because we have a number of land holdings, and there are 100, 120 acres that are in economic development zones on our lands, mostly in the North Shore of Vancouver, but have the potential to be developed as well, connecting with quality transit connections, really nice urban design principles, and planning for the future of Vancouver, which probably doesn't include as many cars as a lot of the current developments are imagining. And I think I'll end it there and just say that this has been a really exciting project for the Squamish Nation. We're looking forward to sharing more details as they become available for the public. But it is one of, I think, a really exciting housing development, and really challenges the notion around what is the demand for housing within our cities. And, there's an economist from UBC named Tom Davidoff, who talks about that the only reason that my nation could propose a development of this scale and size is because there's a clear need for it. We've estimated that this is the type of development that the city actually needs, and that there's actually even a profitable margin to investing in a development like this, because there's a huge need. If you had done 10 Senakws across the city, then it would seriously challenge the financial viability of those projects, because there would be too much supply of those types of housing. So it shoots through, and I think challenges the presumed ceiling of this conversation around whether we need more housing or not. We clearly do. And it's the indigenous nations that can and should benefit most from our land development, because when we look at all of the development that's happened within our territory, all of this is our land. We haven't seen any value creation generated off of our lands that has gone back to our communities to support the development and well-being of the indigenous people whose lands that have been colonized and taken from us. So we're going to do that ourselves, and we're going to work with others who want to join us in that aspiration to benefit the local indigenous communities the ways that we should have been from the start.
Thank you so much, Councillor. I think we have some time for some questions. Evan, are there questions for the Councillor?
Yes, thanks so much, Lynn, and thanks, Councillor. We do have a few questions. The first of which, people generally seem to be curious. Has there been any sort of pushback on this project from the general community or from the Squamish Nation? And what have been some of the challenges when trying to get this project approved?
The short answer is on the Squamish Nation member side of things. We were required under federal law to do a referendum to seek our members' approval on the business terms and the lease terms for the land, because we're leasing the land. That was one piece I forgot to mention. We're leasing the land for 120 years. So the nation will actually reacquire it at the end. We had to do a referendum with our people to perform that fiduciary responsibility. When we did the referendum, 87% voted in favor of the lease and the business terms, approximately. So clear mandate from our members. In terms of the public reaction, I would say that for the scale and size that we've seen on it, it's actually been quite interesting how much there hasn't been a reaction, and that by and large it's been quite supportive by the public. And I think that there's two pieces to that. One is I think there is often a misunderstanding or a misreading of the political economy around housing. Housing is actually really popular. People want more housing, but the challenge is what type, and the challenge is who's going to benefit from that housing. And I think there's something fundamental to the story, which is the Squamish Nation, which is a government and a community who has historically been disadvantaged, is actually going to benefit from this. It's not sort of a private developer just that's going to benefit. And I think those things change the equation around people's reaction.
Awesome, thank you. One other question people are wondering, so are these housing units designated for Indigenous people, or are they also open to be rented to the general market in Vancouver?
It's considered a market, purpose-built market development, so largely serving market needs and open to all who are successful tenants, are applicants to become tenants. And the rents will be based off of a market analysis and what the market is willing to bear in terms of price. There is going to be some affordability, inclusionary zoning incorporated into the development. Some of those units will be dedicated for members at reduced rates, but a very small percent of that will be dedicated for members. We're largely hoping to generate revenue off of this and then use that money to then build new affordable housing developments that are closer to some of the social services that we provide for our members.
Okay, thank you. Two other kind of questions that are somewhat linked. So, well, why was the choice to provide rentals rather than straight condos, and how much money does the nation expect or hope to generate from the development?
Good question. Short answer, our conservative estimate that was based off of a third-party review that was required as a part of the legal due diligence on the referendum estimated about a $20 billion revenue for the project over the lifetime, which is 99 years. And then in terms of the reason for rationale for rental, we did actually leave the terms in the master development agreement and in the lease and the business terms open, that the nation could, or both parties to the partnership could potentially include condo development, strata condo within the development should we want to do that. And that was really a risk mitigation choice. that if the market was to change around purpose-built rental and we felt that the condo market was a more prudent or financially beneficial place to go, then we have the option to do that. But right now it's largely viewed through a purpose-built rental lens. And the rationale for that is there is just more long-term value creation for the nation as a result of the purpose-built rental choice. There are a lot of government programs in Canada that provide government level low interest rate, below 2% interest rate financing for purpose-built rental projects. And accessing those funds changes a lot of the revenue projections drastically, both in terms of the purpose-built rental, but also when we do analysis on comparing an upfront condo development and also the challenges that are happening in the condo development right now and where things are at versus where they've been. Purpose-built rental is just a more long-term strategic choice for us to generate long-term passive revenue for the nation.
Great. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. One of these from Carlos Anthony, who's wondering, prior to the referendum, how were you able to analyze and listen to the voices of your community and conclude that a project like this would be the right path forward?
I would say that the first place that it came from was the fact that when we reacquired these lands, I think for the average person or the casual person, it's pretty obvious that given its location, it would have a significant amount of value because it's located close to the downtown core, it's located near job centers, it's located near transit connections, it's in a very livable part of the city, it's located to mention amenities. So there's a huge amount of value just by the virtue of its location. And so I think that for a lot of the community members, they could very easily understand that this is a particular type of property and that it has a particular type of value that could be utilized. We have other lands that we can do other things with. And so from a land use perspective, it just has a big opportunity for us in that sense. And I think the community understood that from the get-go, and then has clearly given us a strong mandate to support that development.
All right, we probably have time for one more question, and this question might take a little bit anyways. I know you talked a bit about this in the presentation, but someone is wondering if, just briefly again, can you explain the general financing of this project, of who is paying the upfront cost and the breakdown of which revenue goes to whom?
So we have a partnership agreement with our development partner. They bring the expertise on these types of developments and the scale and scope of the development. They've successfully executed on a number of projects like this. They also have the built relationships with potential financiers to support these developments. And they also just bring a significant amount of relationships and other types of capital to the conversation. The general structure that I can share in terms of what's been publicly out there is that it's a 50-50 partnership. So minus any project management fees and minus any project management fees and minus any capital equity put into the pre-development, which has been going on for the last few years. The nation will then receive 50% of net profits. But that being said, there is some elements of it. So for example, it's a purpose-built rental development. We'll have a joint partnership, 50-50 partnership at the management, property management company as well, which will also be a 50-50% partnership. So we'll be charging, the partnership will charge property management fees to itself, which will generate also 50% of the profits from. And then the other piece is under federal legislation in Canada, we as a First Nation can charge property taxes or other types of tax property like taxes on our reserve lands equivalent to the neighboring jurisdiction. So whatever the mill rate and the property tax rate is for the city of Vancouver, the Squamish Nation can charge to the development. There is a number of other taxes. There's a speculation tax, there's foreign buyer taxes, there's a bunch of other things like that, which the nation exclusively as the government is able to charge to the partnership, and we collect 100% of that at our own. That doesn't go to the partnership. And then the last piece I'll also mention is we negotiated a community amenity contribution into the partnership agreement as well, which is a upfront cash transfer from the partnership to the nation as the host government, which was calculated at $60 a square foot. So about, and that's changed a little bit depending on the affordability conditions we might put into the project to benefit our members, but approximately around $60 a square foot. So you do the math on 4 million square feet times $60, you got 240 million, which comes to the nation in phases as each phase enters construction over 4 phases. And that's a cash lump sum we get right at the beginning of the development. And then the rest over the time period is 50-50 net profits. And then as we pay down the financing over time, the revenue projections start to skyrocket.
Okay, Evan, thank you so much for getting those questions for us. And Councillor, we can't thank you enough for being with us. Best of luck with your project. Please keep in touch. And we thank you. Aloha.